So, the topic for today is called sympathetic joy. And before we move into today's topic, were there any questions about last week or anything that we covered or the material, the integration material?
Kind of found it perfect. Really helped. The most rewarding thing was the degree is beyond what I expected, and I want to start peace. And then the text a lot of the things they even asked like, what is quite unexpected that it's make do it to get over cheers. Great.
So there was a comment in the Gompa. We last week we talked about contentment, and there's a workbook that we provide. It's there on the website now for today's class on sympathetic joy. And there's a comment in the Gompa about how someone did some volunteer work between last class and this class, and how that generated a lot of contentment in their mind. So, okay, so this idea, hello, of sympathetic joy, which is the topic for today's class. It's one of the four immeasurable thoughts in Buddhism, also called the four Brahma Viharas, one of the four divine abodes in English, Brahma Vihara, divine abode, or four immeasurable thoughts, um, along with karuna, metta, which love and compassion, sympathetic joy, and then also equanimity. So those are the four immeasurable thoughts, or four Brahma Viharas. So they go back even into the earliest writings on Buddhism. You find the four Brahma Viharas, and it's carried over into uh, even in Tibetan Buddhism, a later kind of tradition. You still have the four immeasurable thoughts, immeasurable in the sense that these are all of these qualities. Again, we're just for today's class just talking about sympathetic joy, but with regard to all of the four immeasurable qualities, they're immeasurable because they can be developed to include all sentient beings. We can develop equanimity and loving kindness and compassion and sympathetic joy, not just toward a small group of others, but we can expand it, we can train in it so that it encompasses every sentient being without exception, which makes it immeasurable because there are an immeasurable number, there's a countless number of sentient beings. Whether the number of sentient beings is truly mathematically infinite, that sort of debated. It's a number that approaches infinity, because if you even just consider the Earth, if you consider how many insects there are on the Earth, it outnumbers the number of humans. I don't know what kind of logarithmic factor, but it's extraordinary. And that's just one planet. And, it's a tiny infinitesimal example of the number of sentient beings within all of cyclic existence. And of course, they say that, unfortunately, if you think about the lower realms, those beings, outweigh the humans, even, and then so on up through the upper realm. So, it debated whether the number is truly infinite, but it's quite an incredibly high number of existing sentient beings. But we can relate to all of these sentient beings through the lenses of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. So, with respect to the specific topic of sympathetic joy for today's class, The definition of sympathetic joy is, in a way, it has two aspects to it. It is to delight, to take delight in the good fortune of others, and also to take delight in the creation of the causes of the good fortune of others, the karmic causes of the good fortune of others. So, which are really two sides of the same coin. Um, when people, in our experience, generally we're talking about observing other human beings. Um, of course, if you want to, you could, think about the bliss and contentment that's available to beings in other realms. But uh, in terms of the earth, when we see people experiencing good fortune, from the Buddhist perspective, that is the ripening result of having created good karma. So we can rejoice, we can take delight both when we observe others engaging in the creation of good karma, and also when that good karma ripens in their experience as a beneficial, circumstance, some overt good fortune that they are receiving. Both of those are useful ways of practicing sympathetic joy, rejoicing, both when we see that someone has achieved something that is beneficial for them, and when we see that they are creating the groundwork for that to happen to them in the future. So we always are talking about what these constructive states of mind are particularly useful for and what they help us to overcome. So, with sympathetic joy, um, mudita is the Sanskrit, but sympathetic joy in English, just like karuna and metta. Um, upeka is the Sanskrit for equanimity, but in English, generally, sympathetic joy is one of the most common translations of mudita. What it helps us to overcome is jealousy, envy, um, feelings of, and if we relate this, I think that there's a way to relate this easily to last week's class on contentment when we talked about fullness, right? We talked about thinking about contentment not just as a settling, like, oh, I things could be better, but this is what I have and I'm grateful, but to really focus on how full our lives are. When we talked about that there are many different afflicted states that deprive us of contentment. We're deprived of contentment when we're angry. We're deprived of contentment, but also we're deprived when we are jealous, when we are envious. And so, with sympathetic joy as a technique, as a process, as a training for reducing how often we experience jealousy and envy, then it directly, you know, helps us to be taken out of that state of fullness, that state of contentment. Um, because inevitably we're going to be confronted with, or we're going to experience others' good fortune, right? As just in life, we're going to experience, and this also kind of relates to the Lojong class that we have, on Sundays with Geshe-la, where he started to, and he'll continue to talk about transforming um, life's experiences into the path, bringing, all of our experiences into our spiritual path. So in our daily life, there are times when those around us meet with good fortune, and we may not feel as though we're meeting as regularly, as consistently with, raises, with economic opportunities, with relationships that seem to be, fulfilling in the same way that we're observing in others. Um, and those are times when, if our tendency toward jealousy or envy is strong, if that's what we are practicing, then that's what will arise. Jealousy, envy will take over because that is the tendency that we've just become familiar with, right? Buddhism talks about the things that the mind experiences are that which the mind is most familiar with. So if we cultivate jealousy, if we cultivate envy, then when we uh, observe good fortune that's not happening to us, what will be natural is for us to think, well, why not me? Not what did they do to cultivate those causes of their good fortune, and how can I cultivate those good causes myself? But just why isn't this happening? The Buddhist answer to why isn't this happening to me is that these other sentient beings are experiencing the ripening of their good karma. And so, of course, it can be a reminder that we also should be creating good karma if we would like to experience. And so I mean, that's twofold, right? In terms of the good fortune that is arising, because we do have good fortune arising in our lives. Um, and if we want more of that, we should understand the karmic cause of it and try to practice the karmic cause of it. And also, when we want to understand why good fortune is arising for others, we see it as the ripening of their good fortune, which is again a reminder that we ourselves need to practice creating good karma so that we experience good fortune in future lives. Uh, so, of course, to whatever degree jealousy and envy are arising in our mind, the mind won't be content. The mind will be disturbed. And so finding strategies, finding trainings that will reduce the amount of these disturbing attitudes means that we'll spend more of our time connected to contentment, connected to ease and peace of mind. So that is, the premise of, and also the benefit of all of these trainings is that they are themselves constructive states of mind, patience and contentment, and the things that, humility, and now sympathetic joy as constructive states of mind. They themselves are pleasant to experience. They themselves, being the opposite of destructive states of mind, when they arise in the moment in the mind, not only are they creating new habits, new tendencies, new familiarities that are replacing old, not so helpful tendencies and habits and familiarities, but when they arise, they are joyful. They are, pleasant to be experiencing in the moment. If we have a choice between, you know, thinking about, oh, I wish this was happening to me, and that kind of tight, kind of comparative, that mind is really painful. That mind is um, genuinely unpleasant when it's happening to us in the moment. If we can replace that with how amazing for this other person that they are able to experience the ripening of their good karma, and they're able to access whatever resources, whatever positive experiences, and we feel that genuinely in our minds and our hearts, then our mind in that moment is expansive. It is, you know, it is connected to others. It's not separate from others. It's not creating disconnection. It's embracing others. And um, inherently, so again, just like the the benefits of reducing these afflictive states, they're benefits of increasing constructive states. Because when it becomes a habit, when it becomes a natural tendency, we will naturally just think those thoughts when those experiences arise in our daily lives. And then not only do we not have to deal with how painful jealousy and envy are, but now we have this spacious, expansive, pleasant mind. Um, and it doesn't, I mean, neither of these mental states actually change what is happening in the environment, right? We we're going to go through this life either way, and there'll be people in our orbit either way who have better fortunes in various ways than we have, right? That's just a fact of what this life is going to contain. Um, and so, really, the choice is when that happens, do I want to relate to that through the lens of jealousy and envy, or do I want to relate to that through the lens of sympathetic joy? Which of those ways of relating to others is more peaceful for myself, is more joyous, more beneficial for myself? Um, so, of course, as with all of these constructive states, these are all lifelong trainings. We're not flipping a switch and becoming patient, becoming humble, becoming, you know, someone who naturally finds it easy to switch into sympathetic joy. Um, and also, too, there's this is also, um, but when we see the benefits of it, then of course we take it on as a training. We take it on as a practice that we try to cultivate. And another aspect of this too, beyond just jealousy and envy, which are kind of the obvious shortcomings of um, observing others and their good fortune, but there's also indifference or apathy, which because this is actually taking a proactive interest in the good fortune of others, right? We're rejoicing. We're not just saying, um, well, okay, yeah, that happened to other people, and good for them. Like that's fine. But we're actually feeling joyous about the good fortune of others, which connects us, right, to what's happening for others. And so it's proactively training the mind to want good things to happen to others, um, which not only overcomes envy and jealousy, but actually also helps us to overcome apathy or indifference. Um, so it's not just like a cool kind of like, yeah, my neighbor got a new car, good for them, but whatever, doesn't really, maybe I'm not jealous about it, maybe I'm not envious about it, but like, okay, fine. But no, it's like you actually this idea of sympathetic, that's where sympathetic comes from, right? This sympathetic joy, they are actually receiving a benefit, and their life is like, now of course you can talk about temporal benefits and ultimate benefits from the Buddhist perspective, and how ultimate benefits are more useful, but regardless, um from this other person's perspective, like their circumstances are improved compared to before, and they have, more breathing room in their life, more, more enjoyment from whatever it might be. So by feeling the same kind of joy that they are feeling, we're it's like in the same way that compassion is kind of like feeling with, feel um it's not a condescending, kind of, oh, I'm so sorry, that it's recognizing that, we're all in the same boat and I've experienced that and you're experiencing that and I'll experience that in the future. So you're kind of putting yourself in their shoes and you're wishing that they be relieved of that. When we have sympathetic joy, you're also trying to share in the measure of joy that they're actually experiencing. And that, as a training, as a habit, makes us curious about what's happening for others, makes us um, actively want to find opportunities to feel joy for what's happening for others, which really is just another layer of benefit that we receive, because we start to really take an interest in what is going on around us, and the more that we, and again, the when we're talking about this sort of mental training, it's oneself that receives the benefit, primarily. Um, because we become someone who not only is impervious now to envy and jealousy, but now we actually are interested. We're seeking out, like, well, what's going, when we're just talking to people and they say, oh yeah, my sister had a baby, or, and I'm an uncle now, and, or oh, I got a raise at work. And so we have, and it going, connecting it again to contentment, we now have this training where every day in every conversation, we're unlocking, these moments where we can feel joy with everybody around us. We can share in their joyful experience again and again and again, and we're the recipients of that, really. They don't care whether we're super happy for them. I mean, it helps to create a warmth, a connection. They feel that connection to some degree, but it's our own mind that now has this tool, a new tool in our toolbox, where we have access to feeling the joy of the people around us just every single day in every conversation that arises. And that sense of connection really is uplifting, for the mind, uplifting, for oneself. Okay. Great. All right, so now we will move into the meditation portion of the class. So try to sit comfortably, thinking about keeping your back straight, torso open, hands on the lap, right over left, with the palms upturned and the thumbs gently touching. Eyes are gently closed or slightly open, making sure we let in enough light to remain alert. And try to maintain an awareness of not slouching, not leaning. Also letting go of any unnecessary tension or rigidity in the body. Just relaxing into a stable, comfortable, upright position. And begin to move the mind inward, allowing sights and sounds to be as they are without investigation. And beginning to concentrate your awareness in the present by attending closely to the physical sensation of the air as it moves into and back out of the tip of the nostrils. Giving yourself the instruction to notice quickly and anything other than that one physical sensation is arising in your mind. And then, without judgment or frustration, to lift your awareness up from those distractions and to place it gently but firmly again and again on the breath. And then generate a positive motivation, reflecting on the benefits of cultivating the habit of sympathetic joy, the benefits for oneself, one's relationships, becoming more connected with others, reducing one's own tendency toward jealousy, envy, and even indifference. wanting to spend this time to grow that new habit, new tendency, recognizing that the more we can reduce afflictive states of mind, the more we can be of benefit to others. And then begin to bring to mind people you know and think first of their goodness, times when you've seen them engaging in virtue, times when they went out of their way to be helpful, or they put time or energy or effort into a spiritual practice. And recognize that they themselves are sowing the seeds of their own good fortune, and rejoice. Feel how wonderful it is. And then recognize that you've also witnessed many times the ripening of others' good karma as beneficial circumstances. Again, bring to mind examples and think how wonderful that they created those causes, those conditions. And try to work with expectation. Were there times in your life where there were things that you yourself wanted, things that you saw other people being able to enjoy? Notice the dissatisfaction, the unhappy mind. And see that unhappy mind as not in any way changing what's happening for you or for them. Just see it as a habit, create suffering, serves no other function. Try to think of the joy that they were experiencing and delight to whatever degree you can. And then on the basis of seeing in your own direct experience the benefits of cultivating this habit, trying to give rise to a strong determination to find as many opportunities as possible to truly share in the measure of others' joy. Seeing how it costs nothing and brings only happiness to oneself. And rest your mind in that strong determination. And then when you're ready, we'll come back together. All right. Are there any final thoughts or questions, reflections? Mhm.
Really.
All right, I think I covered everything I wanted to, so we can end a little bit early today. Next week is in 2 weeks, kindness is the next topic. Geshe-la's retreat is next weekend. So what is that? His retreat is going to be, it's a little bit advanced. He's teaching on basically properly relating to the spiritual guide. It's a major topic in traditional Tibetan Buddhism. He's going to be focusing on a practice called the Ganden Lagema, which is a a practice in relation to Lama Tsongkhapa, the founder of the Gulug tradition, um, and also giving some teachings on proper reliance in general. Is this class every other Saturday? Mhm. And after the 4 months, does it end in 2 weeks? Or? No, we've got like it's like yeah, like 12 more classes or something. Yeah.
What should be a lot by then?
All right. Thanks for coming.